still makes me smile every time things work. How about that? Thursday edition. Good call, Anthony. We'll give you the first word. Feliz Cinco de Mayo, UFAs. I guess what I have to say, UFAs in Spanish as well. I know F-A. F-A, Oz. Yeah, we'll keep this in English today. Welcome in. Thursday edition. Day 4, dramatic music. Here we go, I think. Looking to build the fun as we go. And really appreciate you being a part of it. Jan, also in the house. With UFAs in the house. York, Craig, Jason, Colette with an hola. Great to have you guys along. Looking forward to today's program. Still trying to figure it out as we're entering into show number 4. But glad you can be a part of the show. And we'll start with the poll question. Done that before multiple times in a couple of different shows. Always like to have fun with the poll question. Got it up on Twitter. At Tim Hill, UFA is the account. Because today is May 5th, especially today, the poll question is very simply, what is the most underrated day? And right now, Thursday, leading the way here on Thursday. Cinco de Mayo in second place. Opening day in second place, my fault, at 25% of the vote. Thursday's getting near half the vote. Cinco de Mayo in third place, just behind opening day. April Fool's Day right now in a distant fourth place. Again, Tim Hill, UFA, where you can go and vote. And when you do that, you need to know the rules and restrictions on today's vote as well, because I mentioned write-in votes are highly encouraged. Memorial Day voted on by Brian B., and I had to refer him to the rules and regulations, rules and restrictions. The day must not be a state or federal holiday in the United States. A write-in vote for your own birthday automatically makes you a narcissist of the highest degree. And if your first impulse, I had a typo there. That makes me angry. If your first impulse is to dismiss this poll as inane and beneath you, lighten up, Francis. Current appeal waiting. The appeal process, by the way, if you write in a holiday that may already be a federal holiday, the appeal process, the official appeal board accepts written appeals of no more than 3 sentences, at least 1 hour prior to the poll's official daily close at noon Eastern. And the official appeal board will rule immediately. All final rulings final. The final Monday occurring in the month of May states its case, Brian says, as underrated, as to which much of the current USA populace are unaware of the sacrifices and dedication put forth to secure and ensure the freedoms enjoyed daily across today's land. That was his appeal for Memorial Day. The official appeal board accepts his appeal and now makes Memorial Day eligible to be one of the most underrated days out there, despite it being a federal holiday. Brian did also add, in the event of my current appeal awaiting ruling, I will submit National Pancake Day to read Pankake in honor of Gamecock slugger Joey Pancake. Some of you might have heard of, I don't know, if you watched the College World Series back in the day, as the most underrated day. Brian clearly gets the show. I appreciate your participation highly, sir. Well done. And looking forward to some other submissions, as Mac has already corrected me on Twitter with the your mistake typo. And that's what I can come to count on Mac for on this show. We're all learning our roles. It's day 4, right? Everybody learning their roles. How about Jan with a write-in vote for Wednesday at the Masters? And then he corrects his typo. Wednesday at the Masters, the par 3. Okay. I'm a big fan of Monday at the Masters. I'm guessing a bunch of people down at the beach who go to Monday after the Masters might be a fan of that one as well, with the live music combo. But Monday at the Masters is fantastic because you have the buzz, right? You got all the energy. First major of the year. Typically, it's that things are turning from a weather standpoint, right? You got so many people from so many different places, man. You hear so many different accents if you've ever been down at Augusta and just kind of milling about. And then you get to see all the guys. They're all there. Most of them are there anyway, and out and about, whether they're on the range, they're going through their practice rounds. And it's the kind of the uncertainty that I like about it. Right. If it's Thursday through Sunday at the tournament, you know, the tee time, you know, the groups, you know, the pairings, who will be playing with who, how they're set up on the course, the whole thing. Practice rounds, these guys don't have, they don't make it public when they're going to be on the course. For all you know, Tiger Woods might end up just walking right by you. Just happen to work out that way from a timing standpoint. So I'll go with Monday. I like the write-in vote Jan's given for Wednesday at the Masters. So starting a little lighthearted today. Hopefully we can end up getting that vibe more and more on this show because, man, it's one of my pet peeves when you're talking sports and you take yourself too seriously, and we all get start shaking our fists, or we're talking legalities or rules and the whole thing. And one of the big headlines today is name, image, and likeness, and the commissioners from the SEC and the Pac-12 meeting with Congress or members of Congress and senators and the whole thing. So I'm not saying there's not a place for serious discussion, but on this show, I'd like to keep it as light as possible. And our first guests will try to do that. I want to see if I can get him some proper intro music here. I think I found something just perfect for one of my old buddies. Let's see what we got here. See if I can get it right. Let's try here. Here we go. He fancies himself a country music kind of guy. And so this sounds a little bit country, a little bit Hootie and the Blowfish, dare I say, bringing in my buddy Scott Eisberg. Let's see, Scotty. What do you think? Are you a?
That's not country. That's.
All right, you're not a fan. Okay.
Is that just free music for you? Is that free music that you could use on the fourth day of your podcast without getting busted by like ASCAP or something like that?
Yeah, take it easy on me, man. I'm going from the YouTube free library. Okay. If you want to text up your buddy Darius Rucker and try to have him pop in the show and play live for you, go right ahead, man. Go right ahead.
It's funny. I am. It shows the clout that I have. I called my good buddy Justin Smoke to jump on. I called him like 5 minutes ago, and he goes, "Bro, I'm just taking old people's money on the golf course right now." So I guess he wasn't available to jump on, but he was making some money off old people out at Stone Oak Ferry.
Very nice. Scott, for those of you who don't know, Scott Eisberg, WCIV sports director down in Charleston, has been. Scotty, how long have you been in Charleston now, man?
15 plus years.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts me because I met Scott when he was still a student at the University of South Carolina. You were an intern at the time at WCIV, went on to be an intern at WOLO where I worked, and then first job up in the upstate. Let's see if I can get the career correct. You were up in the upstate at I can't even think of the call letters right now. Help me out, Scotty. NBC affiliate.
We're your friend for. We're your friend for.
WYFF. How about that?
There you go. Yeah, you got it.
YFF up in Greenville, then in Columbia, then over to Charleston, right? So you bounced around all over the state of South Carolina, a University of South Carolina graduate. I will never forget the first time I met you. You were trying to convince me you were from Charleston, and I listened to two words out of your mouth. I said, "This kid's Charleston, get out of here, man."
Well, I've now been in Charleston longer than I've been in New York total, so I guess theoretically I could claim it home now, right?
Yeah, now you could. Back then, after having interned for a few months when you were trying to do it, absolutely not. Long Island native, though, correct? Born and bred, and proud former lacrosse star back in the day.
Yeah, I played. Well, I was terrible, and our team sucked. But I still maintained a love for the game. I spent like 14 hours watching lacrosse in Irmo on Saturday, this past Saturday. So my love for lacrosse is still there, although baking in the sun at Hawkins Stadium, not exactly on the list of endeavors that I want to do again.
I can imagine there. Last night doing a little softball, is that right? A little crazy softball playoff finish?
A little softball last night. I shot a little Lexington soccer last night. They lost to Ashley Ridge, so that exciting spring sports season going on in the high school ranks. But I'm assuming on your cool podcast that all the cool kids in Columbia are listening to. High school sports in the Low Country are not very high on your list of things to talk about.
Maybe come state championship weekend or so. We'll move
go.
it up the list. But let's start you out with the poll question today. What's the most underrated day? What do you got? You want to go with one of the four options that we have technically?
Underrated or overrated?
Underrated day of the year. So this is an honor. I don't know if you know this. Today is the 5th of May. Some call it Cinco de Mayo. So we got that as an option on the poll question. We've got Thursday as an option on the poll question. Today is also Thursday. We've got opening day and April Fool's Day, all as options officially on today's poll question on the Twitter. And that'll become official at the end of the show. We will start something and we will finish it today live on the live stream here. But you can also write in some days. The rules and restrictions, though, no federal holiday, no day off officially. Otherwise, it wouldn't really be underrated, in my opinion.
I think I'm a fan of Cinco de Mayo. I mean, this is a good day. If you could make a holiday and have margaritas, tacos, whatever. I don't love that. I don't love that a lot of Mexican restaurants just get so overcrowded and packed. Right. Usually you're in and out in 10 minutes. Right. I hate going to a Mexican restaurant and waiting. And usually they're just watering down the margaritas at this point. It's just it's like the Costco bulk Mexican food in one day. So I feel like if you go to a Mexican restaurant yesterday, you probably get a better experience than today.
Absolutely.
So that would make today, I guess, overrated rather than underrated, right? I guess it would be overrated rather than underrated. Although yesterday is the shittiest day of the year. The May 4th thing is the dumbest. If I had to see one more person say May the 4th be with you, first of all, Star Wars stinks. And this might not be a hot take. Star Wars sucks. That being said, I guess May the 4th, that thing is stupidly overrated. I'm going to go underrated opening day of baseball. I mean, to me, it's a holiday. It's a wonderful day. This year, obviously, with the lockout for those 2 weeks, I don't know, maybe it took a little bit of the shine off of it. But I still say, I mean, that when you're looking at ideal days to just sit on the couch, I mean, to me, I don't think it's underrated anymore. It's not underrated, but I mean, the best sports day of the year, no doubt about it, it's Thursday of the NCAA tournament. But that's not underrated because I think everybody says that's one of the great sports days of the year. But Thursday of the NCAA tournament, no doubt, is the best sports day of the year, without question. Overrated this Saturday. Couldn't care less about the Derby. Could not care less about the Derby. Extremely overrated on Derby Day. It's kind of like a weird. It's like a weird week of overrated, underrated things, but a lot going on this week. But I think the Derby, I could not care less. I mean, the fact that there are people that work in Louisville, Kentucky that are following around horses for the next 2 months is, I mean, there's not a place in the world I'd rather work less than to, try to get a soundbite out of a horse over the next 2 months.
It is the second most odd thing, I think, in sports in our country, the Kentucky Derby. We all have a clue about horse racing. Just the pretentiousness and the whole thing.
Yeah,
and we're supposed to understand exactly what horse is coming. I don't understand it, but it's behind the Olympics. It's how the Olympic sports and swimming and track and field and gymnastics, we all are supposed to care immediately in the Summer Olympics, and we just completely ignore it for 3 years and 50 weeks. Completely ignored. And then all of a sudden, this is a great sports spectacle that we're supposed to latch on to and really live, breathe, and die with the results of our. I don't quite get that one either. You disagree, it looks like.
Yeah, you're talking to a guy who drops $150 a week at the Ice Palace for my daughter to take ice skating lessons, and now my other one is starting on Saturday. So the amount of money I'm spending for them to become figure skaters is stupid. So needless to say, I'm going to have to stand up for ice skating. And you would not think it, but Charleston is a very big ice skating community. A lot of ice skaters live here in Charleston. It's crazy. Tara Lipinski lives out on Kiowa Island. Nathan Chen, who won the gold, trains here at the Ice Palace. We've got like a bunch of ice skating, a bunch of ice acumen here in the Low Country. So needless to say, I do have an affinity for the ice, but I'm a hockey guy. I mean, this is just getting me closer to hockey. I don't have daughters that play hockey. At least it gets me to the rink. And right now, best time of the year, Stanley Cup playoffs. Nothing more intense than that. I know I listened to your show yesterday. You said you watched a bit of that Rangers game the other night. That overtime, just a beautiful game right there. And for Pittsburgh to win that one with a backup goalie playing his third NHL game of the year, it was great stuff.
And that was the former Stingrays goalie, is that right?
No, he played against the Stingrays. Okay. As far as former Stingrays goalie, there are a bunch in the NHL right now. He was not one of them.
See, what you've already seen from Scotty, and Sean says he completely agrees about yesterday being the dumbest holiday of the year. First, I don't even recognize it as any. I didn't even mention it. That's how dumb I think it is.
It's the dumbest thing in the entire world. It's ridiculously dumb.
I am firmly on record. Whenever I hear Star Wars, all that goes on in my head is pew 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 pew. I don't get it at all.
For me, the only thing I think of is Chris Farley and Tommy Boy speaking into the fan when he goes, "Luke, I am your father." It's the only Star Wars thing I've got going in my head is Chris Farley and Tommy Boy.
Fair enough. So we're firmly entrenched there in the same camp. What about from the hockey perspective? Let's get back to hockey real quick. So the Penguins ended up winning that thing. What you guys have already seen, what I wanted to say is that Scotty can connect any sporting event back to where he's working to how many degrees? Usually I'd say 3 degrees max.
Yeah, usually pretty tight. And I mean, it helps in hockey that we cover hockey. I mean, we've got a 30-year ECHL team here, but like I could bring it back to the Columbia Inferno if you need me to. Right now, Dallas Stars are in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Dallas Stars, do you know who their assistant general manager is?
No, but you're going to tell me.
Yeah, Scotty White, former Columbia Inferno head coach. Scott White is the assistant GM of the Dallas Stars, and Dave Zeiss is their head trainer, and he was the trainer for the Columbia Inferno back in the early 2000s. So it ties back to Columbia as well.
It's why we bring Scotty on the program. It's why he's a legend in the state of South Carolina. One of the reasons why he's a legend. Jason has the question: are you an Islanders fan, sir? Go Isles.
Yeah. So I grew up a huge Islanders fan. Huge. And I was at the new building this year. I fell off the Islanders bandwagon when they moved to Brooklyn. It was a big deal because they were Long Island's team. They were the only professional team on Long Island. For the Islanders, like that was our team. We're not from New York City. Like we're from Long Island, and they were our professional team. When they moved to New York City for those years, I fell off the bandwagon altogether, and I actually became much bigger. I'm actually, I would say right now I'm a pretty big. If I'm pulling for two teams, I'm pulling for a team in the West, team in the East. I pull for the Maple Leafs and the Colorado Avalanche right now because of personal ties. But I'm pretty good friends with the head coach of the Avalanche, who lives here in Charleston, Jared Bednar. Played for the Stingrays for years and years and years. And a guy named Spencer Carberry was the head coach of the Stingrays. Played here. I knew him for years, and he still lives here in town. Has a house here in town, and he's an assistant coach with the Maple Leafs. So I pull for them for personal ties, just because they're really good guys and spend a lot of time here in Charleston, and we text pretty often. But yeah, I grew up an Islanders fan, but and I'll be one again now that they're back on Long Island, and I was in the new building. But I definitely fell off the bandwagon when they moved out of the Nassau Coliseum.
Man, the most hockey talk we've had on this program for a while.
Yeah.
You mentioned your daughters being ice skaters. So is that what is the hockey parent like? Do you know? Or is there the thing of the dads pushing the girls, especially into hockey?
I mean, well, I'd love for them to play hockey. I don't foresee that happening. But yeah, no, I mean, the figure skating thing, yeah, it's fine. I don't know anything about it. I know nothing about figure skating. I know how to skate, but I have hockey skates. So as far as parenting, for me, there's zero pressure whatsoever. Could not care less. Like, do not care. It's funny, the hockey dads that are there are very much, a lot of northern transplants who grew up playing hockey, want to get back on the ice, and I think there's a feeling of I think there's a lot of feeling of you're going to do this and you're going to do this right because they spend so much money. You're spending, all these other sports that you play. I mean, for them, you're spending, but you're not spending at the level of ice time, equipment, skates. I mean, that is expensive stuff. You're putting a lot of investment into hockey when you're parenting hockey. So I think part of it is like you're putting a pretty big investment in there. So you gotta like get the return for your investment a little bit. At least let your 8-year-old kid drop the gloves, maybe knock out a tooth, something that would make him, dignified on Facebook as a hockey player to your friends up north.
Absolutely. I haven't dealt with that at all. I got the flag football and baseball going. I have more appreciation for that after hearing the price tags with you. And
Yeah,
basketball, the same deal. I think we're going to stick to that, but that's my southern roots for sure.
yeah, there you go.
Minus the old Greensboro Monarchs days when I was in high school, growing up, going to some ECHL hockey games, and then covering the old Columbia Inferno for a few years in town as well. Let's get. Are you wearing garnet right now? Is that what you're doing?
No,
Are,
I mean,
are
I
we
don't know.
serious homers? I
It's a
got
golf
black and
shirt.
you got garnet right now. Are we
I think
serious
that
Gamecock
theoretically, I
homers?
could be wearing this for College of Charleston. I could be
Okay.
wearing this for Wando. I mean, there are several places I could be wearing this shirt. It's just a shirt. There is no emblem on it. But I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about, whether it be garnet and black or whatever else it might be.
All right, let's start with Carolina baseball. Last night, 9-4 win over North Carolina A&T, taking care of what they should have taken care of. I think A&T is like 13-30, even though they've beaten some big-time programs in the ACC, I think, this year. It was Josiah Seitler with a 3-run homer. He leads the team in homers with 9.
That was a tank. He
Yes,
dropped an absolute tank, the one that went over the bus in right field.
the impressive part to me was that he kept it fair, having turned on that thing so quickly as a
Yeah.
left-handed hitter there, and seeing so many of those usually just hook foul and just go forever. That was impressive. 4 errors. They kicked it around pretty good. They were lucky to not get hurt more than that. It wasn't a pretty game by any stretch of the imagination. Andrew Eister with 3 hits in the ball game, I believe, and then Brant Belk late. Did you see that swing? It was one of the weirdest things I've seen. It was Brant Belk's a lefty hitter, right, leadoff guy, hitting 3 solid, maybe in the 50s, a solid average,
Yeah.
playing well for Carolina this year. Swung, got a hit the opposite way, but you could tell the end of the swing didn't end up right, and he's been battling a bad ankle, and I think kind of re-aggravated that thing after the game. Mark Kingston saying that if he can walk this weekend, he's going to play against Texas A&M. But the larger conversation is the struggles that have been Carolina baseball. And Chad Holbrook pretty well, being the College of Charleston coach. This has happened, several years prior. We've seen Carolina baseball certainly fall from where it was as the class of the country and winning national back-to-back championships, national championships back-to-back years, playing for a third in a row. Where are you with the state of the program right now, and Mark Kingston leading it?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I think okay would be like the best way to describe it. I think right now Clemson underachieving, South Carolina okay. Status quo. Is it enough to save his job? I think it's enough to save his job. If he makes the tournament, I think it's enough to save Kingston's job, but certainly nothing overly exciting. It's funny that Chad Holbrook is actually the one that's having the most exciting year of all. I think they're 16-2 in the CAA. The college is going to be in the tournament, which is it shows you something there. Chad Holbrook knows what he's doing building programs. I mean, he certainly knows how to do that. Kingston, I think he's a baseball guy. He's well respected. It seems like he's liked by his players. He's got several low country guys up there now. Aiden Hunter's having a nice season for them on the mound. My question was he the right hire to begin with? I don't know. I don't know if he was the right hire to begin with. He's just he's a quiet guy. He's a reserve guy, and that's fine. But I would think he'd be the guy that would be. You'd want to be around the state, pressing the flesh, getting to know guys, really, truly entrenching yourself in baseball in South Carolina, which I'm sure he's doing some of. I just don't know how much he's doing. I haven't seen him a ton down here. I think when you're the head coach of the Gamecocks, you have such a prime recruiting area for baseball right here in the state of South Carolina. I mean, transfer portal, junior college, all that stuff changes it a little bit. But I just haven't seen a ton of excitement around the program. It's not, there's not the buzz, and of course, buzz comes when you go to Omaha. I mean, buzz comes going to Omaha, and they have not been to Omaha in his tenure. They've been to one super regional at Arkansas a couple of years ago, so it's not like the it factor buzz around the program. And maybe that's just his personality. Maybe that's their record, especially on the road. I think there will be buzz if they sweep A&M this weekend down in Texas. Yeah, there'll be buzz. That changes the whole trajectory. They take a 3-win weekend against Alabama at home, go down to A&M and get throttled this weekend. I think he's back on the hot seat, and you got to kind of wonder about the trajectory of the program, because we know they never play well in the SEC tournament.
Yeah, and it's always been an afterthought, but it's been an afterthought typically because it hasn't mattered at all.
Right, you're in the tournament. You're in the big dance.
But not just in the tournament, Scotty. Typically in a place to host, be one of the 16 regional sites, and possibly be one of the top 8 seeds. How they used to do it in the whole deal, and that's not where this team is. The fact that they just swept Alabama, I think, keeps this conversation relatively relevant, because if that had not happened and the record continued to be as bad as it was in the SEC, man, the frustration, the anger level really peaking, I think, for Gamecock fans. But now to be a game ahead of Florida in the standings, a game behind Vandy in the SEC standings,
right?
That's certainly nothing embarrassing at all to me. It just shows you what this conference is outside of Tennessee, which when you're talking about going back to the original hire, like, that's what South Carolina wanted to find in Mark Kingston, right? What Tony Vitello's done.
Tony Vitello is outlandish and boisterous and all the things that I was talking about before. That Kingston is not personality-wise. Sure. Vitello is. When he bumped the umpire, he was out on campus. I saw the next day with a sign saying "chest bumps for charity" or something like that. He's just kind of a boisterous personality that you need that. I mean, I think you need that. Whether Ray Tanner knows baseball a whole lot better than I do, so he knows what you truly need, X's and O's on the field wise. But I like having that boisterous personality that's out there representing your program. I think it helps in recruiting, no matter what. I think it always helps in recruiting. But like we said, this is a wins and losses business. If they go down to A&M and they prove that they can't win on the road in the SEC, that the proof is in the pudding right there. They're a good home team. Absolutely. They got to do it on the road, especially because their road to Omaha is not going to be through Columbia.
2-10, I think, is the road record, Scotty. Sorry to interrupt you there. 2-10, I think the Gamecocks are. Mark Kingston showing a little personality last night after the game, saying they're switching it up. They're going Hawaiian shirts as they travel out to A&M, and he's already got his ready to roll. And this was on the suggestion of senior Andrew Eister. So I hear what you're saying about that for sure. What else were you going to say?
I was going to say that obviously Tennessee is just an absolute wagon this year. They're just unreal, and I would venture to think they win the College World Series. Good for them and what they're doing. But I mean, the 2-10, take it for what it is. As far as your best teams in South Carolina, the SEC is really, really darn good. I mean, that's the bottom line in all of this. You could say that Coastal is one of the best teams in the league, but they're still playing in the CAA. And you could say Wofford's a top 25 team this year. Yeah, but they're still playing in the SoCon and got just housed by Clemson a week or two ago. These smaller market teams, if you will, are good teams. I still don't put them up against South Carolina or Clemson. I think South Carolina or Clemson easily, are better than all of these mid-major teams in the state right now. My biggest question, without question, is how, Clemson has guys who are just mashing the ball right now. How are they not winning more? They have Wagner's having one of the best offensive seasons we've ever seen, and they have guys who absolutely mash the ball. I'd like to see Clemson winning a bit more, because of that offensive skill that they have. If they could put it all together, I would have thought they're a pretty good team.
Yeah, Max Wagner, 21 home runs on the season, up there in the national leaders. I mentioned Josiah Seitler leading the Gamecocks in home runs with just 9 to show the disparity there. Wagner hitting over 461 RBIs. Clemson's record overall pretty good, 28-17, but in the ACC dreadful. at 6-14, and the Gamecocks kind of reverse of that. Overall, it ain't good. 23-20, just barely above 500. But in the SEC, 9-12, tied with a lot of teams kind of right there in the mix. Scotty, everybody but Tennessee from the SEC standings, between 14-7, where Arkansas is on top of the West, and 7-14, where Ole Miss, Missouri, and Kentucky are at the bottom of the standings in the conference. And Tennessee, the outlier, 19-2, just ridiculous, reminiscent of the 2000 version of the Gamecocks that went 50-6 overall.
I will say that when you look at the landscape in the state of South Carolina right now, I know. Look, Mark Kingston is a well-respected baseball guy, and you have to respect any hire that Ray Tanner makes. For people that are going off on Mark Kingston, Ray Tanner did not make that hire blindly. He did not make that hire blindly. He knew what he was looking for when he hired Mark Kingston. And Kingston has been given a bad hand. I mean, every coach has with COVID, but Kingston certainly has had a bad hand with COVID, and injuries have been off the charts. And now you have to – there are other ways to look at injuries. You have to look at injuries in different ways. Are any of these injuries due to overuse or, training or whatever it may be? Like Fred Jordan is a good example down here at the Citadel. He always prided himself on, he coached 28 years, never had a guy that had Tommy John surgery, never had a guy have Tommy John surgery. Well, maybe that was because Fred Jordan was pretty good at managing his pen, managing his pitchers, their innings and whatnot. Maybe there is something to be said about that. But it's hard to blame Kingston on injuries, and it's hard to blame him on, COVID and things that might have held him back from building that program. That being said, I'm sure, there will always be second guessing. Did a guy like Landon Powell, do you just take him from North Greenville and stick him in there and see if he just reinvigorates the program? I have no idea. I mean, he's done obviously very, very well at Division II, but Ray Tanner knows what he's looking for when he hired Mark Kingston.
I was surprised that he went outside the family completely, that he went with a guy, and it was by design. I remember asking him right after Mark Kingston was hired, he mentioned that he kind of went outside a guy with no ties to the state of South Carolina or his coaching tree or anything else. Obviously, Monty Lee, the complete opposite there at Clemson. Chad Holbrook was right-hand man. I think it was that Holbrook experience that had him set to go elsewhere. And, he was an outside guy.
Easier to fire. It's easier as an athletics director, easier to fire a guy that's not your good friend. It makes that job, down the road a little bit easier. My question for you right now, if that job opens up, right? If it opens up, you call Landon Powell, or do you call Jim Toman? I would think Jim Toman would be high on the list, and he's done a really nice job at Middle Tennessee State. Who do you call for that? Mark Calvi, you call for that job? Like, who do you call right now?
No, I don't think you can call either of those former assistants. You either go with the young up-and-comer, right? The alum who played there, helped lead the program as a player to the College World Series, and Landon Powell, proven track record on a different level, assuming that's what he's wanting to do, right? I'm
assuming financially it will be substantially higher than North Greenville.
Sure. But I think you're leaving out the big name other guy, right? The big name proven coach out there in college baseball who might be not so happy with his administration or whatever it was. I was surprised we didn't have that situation. It was Kevin O'Sullivan was the rumored guy back in the day before Kingston was selected. Someone like that, not necessarily him. At another.
Well, I think in that case, I don't know if South Carolina has the funds to do it, but I think you obviously go for Chris Lemonis, being a South Carolina guy. I mean, guy just won a national championship. I think you throw the book at him and write the check, but I just don't know if you could do it because Mississippi State, aside from living in Starkville, Mississippi State's got to be the best baseball job in the country, just facilities-wise and everything else like that.
It does help to have the Rafael Palmeiro hitting facility and Will Clark alum and the whole thing. Will be interesting to see. But I think you hit on it earlier. What happens towards the end of the season going to be a big factor, a massive factor into the trajectory, the direction of the program, and the Mark Kingston era.
Yeah.
We just saw one series, Alabama sweep. that really changed the relevance of this year's team from an SEC perspective. Now, what happens at Texas A&M this weekend? Florida and Kentucky left after that. So Carolina with a chance to get back and work their way in the NCAA tournament, which we're not used to saying on May 5th for sure from baseball perspective. I want to talk a little basketball now and bring in our buddy John Combs as well. John, now the head coach over at Westwood High School. The more the merrier on this program. John, thanks for joining us, man. Scotty, you and John ever cross paths back in the day? I know you were probably separated. John was just in front of me at Carolina, so I know you guys didn't cross each other from a college perspective, but obviously I'm guessing from the high school realm, you guys maybe crossed paths a few times.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think my only tie to Westwood was Jeff DiBattisto, who coached here at Bishop England. So I know Debo really well. But
so direct connection then, John, right?
An absolute direct connection. I mean, Jeff was in my wedding. I was in Jeff's wedding. And I've got great respect for what Scott does, for how he puts high school basketball out there. And he does a great job with high school athletics in general. So, yeah.
So let's talk about Lamont Paris then, the new hire for South Carolina basketball. Scotty, you were talking about from a personality perspective and Mark Kingston, how it's more low key, right? Lamont Paris, I think, pretty well known for being that low key kind of personality. And I think took a lot of Gamecock fans by surprise that he ended up getting the job. John, you were a former manager for Eddie Fogler back in the day, really been around the Gamecock program for a long time, been a high school coach in the state of South Carolina for a long time. Let's start with you here, your initial thoughts of the Lamont Paris hire, and then maybe what you've learned since then.
Well, it's like everything. It's let's wait and see how everything goes over time. You know, Coach Paris will. I've had a chance to speak to him one time. He reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. I will say this: this has got to be the most difficult time in history to take over a college basketball program. I mean, this is the first time ever that the transfer portal has been in full effect for a new coaching hire, and then you got the NIL money that's coming about. He's having to just re-recruit his own players and try to fill a roster. So I mean, of course, I was happy for my friend Kerry Rich to be a part of the staff. I think that was a very wise move on Coach Paris's part. You know, we've also had fortune. We had Coach Eddie Shannon. He stopped by the other day to check us out in a workout. So you can hear that they're going to make the state of South Carolina a priority when it comes to recruiting. Now it's just part of let's go do it. So I'm excited for Coach Paris, and we'll see how he does.
Scotty, what do you think about that hire?
Yeah, I like the hire. I think, you know, there's two, you can play devil's advocate on that point, which I guess is what you kind of want on a podcast, is that the NIL allows, or the transfer portal, I should say, allows him to jump in and make his own team, make a team that's his and not play with a Frank Martin team. You know, there are certainly advantages as a coach that you can just jump in and have a team set up the way you want a team to be set up, because there are so many openings to fill there, and yeah, you don't have the continuity, but maybe if you want to play a different style and you are a different style coach than Frank Martin, you want a different style player than Frank Martin had. So I think that gives him the opportunity. And now there is such a parity in college basketball. There is such a small difference between, the SoCon and the SEC. Now, yeah, the SoCon's not going to go nearly as deep, but your top five players on a SoCon team and your top five players in an SEC team are relatively similar. And that's why you see all these, upsets, quote unquote, all the time. And I think Lamont Paris has the advantage in that he knows guys in the SoCon or in mid-major conferences that he could bring in, do what he wants to do, and know that they can compete at an SEC level. Hayden Brown, of course, being one of them at the Citadel. I mean, the numbers he put up for years here were gaudy, just gaudy numbers. A fantastic person, a fantastic player, and Lamont Paris knows him because he had to play him twice a year.
I'm interested in hearing you guys take on South Carolina prospects, basketball prospects, and how it relates to the University of South Carolina basketball program. G.G. Jackson, obviously the headliner from Ridgeview this year, number one player in the country by some estimations, goes to the University of North Carolina. Seen it many times in the state of South Carolina where that has happened. Larry Davis back in our day, kind of John, and Raymond Felton after that, and you can go down the list.
Well, it is exciting time for South Carolina high school basketball, having a guy like G.G. Jackson in the state, who's a phenomenal basketball player, and excited for his upside. Now it would be interesting to see, like, how does Coach Paris and his staff, get involved with South Carolina high school basketball and the players that are involved with it. Now he wants to try to go get a Cam Scott, who's over at Lexington High School, that's being recruited heavily by North Carolina and some other schools. And that's the thing now, having a guy like Kerry Rich on staff. Kerry knows probably literally almost everybody, it seems like, in the basketball circles here in our state. Well, maybe that will allow him to uncover some of these players quicker. Because Kerry has good relationships with everybody in all four corners of the state, even down in the low country area, whether it's also in the beach, the Greenville area, Spartanburg area. Every year you got to be prepared. I mean, G.G. Jackson wasn't a household name forever. I think people maybe started knowing about him a little bit as a freshman, but he wasn't, even as a freshman at Ridgeview High School, he wasn't a can't miss high major prospect. It's only really kind of recently in the past couple of years that all of a sudden he went from being a guy with a great potential to, top 10, number one player type in the country.
Scotty, you mentioned the low country there, John. You've seen a couple of guys here recently, Aaron Neesmith, Josiah James, kind of stick out to me, guys going from the low country to other SEC programs and kind of jumping over South Carolina. What do you think the perception has been, or the environment has been, and do you think Lamont Paris can change that from the South Carolina head coach perspective?
Well, I think to me, the first one was Chris Middleton. Now, he didn't go SEC when he went to Texas A&M. They were still in the Big 12 when he went to A&M, but they were the first ones that reached out to him. They were the first ones that offered him, and he stuck with their commitment. I think there's something to be said about finding guys early. Aaron Neesmith, the same, kind of a late blooming prospect. Did I expect Aaron Neesmith to be a top 15 pick in the NBA draft? No, I mean, he was a great high school player, but he was playing alongside Josiah, which certainly helped him. Josiah makes any player look better around him. He's such a good point guard. He plays any position. He can play four positions on the court. I don't think it's a South Carolina or not South Carolina thing. I just think it's truthfully, I think it's just the relationships that those guys have with coaches. And Porter Gaud's a different bear anyway, because they're academically so good. It opens them up to other programs. And I mean, if you look at Porter Gaud, you've got two guys playing in the Ivy League right now, and Jake Lanford and three guys, Paxton Wojcik, Denham Wojcik, and Jake Lanford. You've got guys at Tennessee. You've got players spread around, but I think academics certainly plays into it quite well there. But I don't know how much Porter Gaud or any of those schools have to do with it. I think there's so much recruiting on the AAU circuit in the summer. I don't know if it matters as far as high school goes, but I think if Lamont Paris makes his presence known down here, guys will take note of that. And if they like his personality and they like what he's doing up there, I think so. And of course, I hate to say it over and over again, but the NIL matters. If Lamont Paris could offer them something that other schools can't offer them, then I think you're going to get players.
John, what about your perspective as a high school coach right here in Blythewood?
Well, one of the things Scott touched on, which is dead on, is the relationship building. And the earlier you can do that, the better. When I was at Ben Lippen, we played Porter Gaud in the first round, second round of the playoffs, when they had Aaron Neesmith and Josiah James. And Aaron Neesmith absolutely lit us up for 32. We, quote unquote, held Josiah James to like 8 points, but Aaron Neesmith is the one that destroyed us. And everybody was talking about Josiah James at the time. And I was like, Aaron Neesmith is a ball player. I mean, he was really good. And I was even kind of surprised. I was like, why isn't he getting more notoriety? Well, we can even talk about Ja Morant back in the day. I mean, South Carolina did offer Ja Morant kind of late. But, Murray State was in on him early. And so really it's developing relationships as early as you possibly can, identifying guys that could be prospects. And, that's one thing I think Coach Fogler and his staff back in the day was really good at, developing relationships with guys and wanting to make the in-state talent a priority. But you can't let I'm a Gamecock. I've spent 7 years there altogether. So I hope that they do extremely well. So I hope that they can develop relationships with guys and, not lose a Ja Morant, and develop that relationship with them early. Get an Aaron Neesmith, get a Josiah James. But even as Scott pointed out, the AAU coaches, that's a big part of it. It's all of it. But as he also pointed out, the new thing in town is the NIL deals. When those come out, I may really like a place, but if another place is going to offer me $100,000 more a year to go play, why not take that chance? I think most of us would do that. I like my job, but I promise you, if another high school, which they won't, were to come around and offer me $100,000 more, I would have to strongly consider that. So yeah.
And to that point, there's also misses. I mean, there are misses out there. Milton Jennings was a can't miss prospect. I mean, he was okay at Clemson, but not a whole lot more than that. I know up in your neck of the woods, Seventh Woods was a good player in college, but I mean, I think where did he end up? At Morgan State, I think he ended up at this year. There are guys, and I'm not saying those guys are misses, because they still got college educations and college degrees, and they did everything they wanted to do and played overseas. But there's no guaranteed prospects out there. So, I mean, that's a big part of Lamont Paris's job, is identifying guys that that he thinks will project to play really well in college. And then, of course, there's got to be a happy medium of getting guys who are going to stay in your program. Do you want to spend 4 years recruiting a guy who's going to be there for 1 year? I mean, I don't know if that's worth it in building a program. That's what's so hard about building a program right now, is you probably want to get a guy that will stay for a couple of years and build a program. There's not many programs that are just strictly built around freshmen. I know Kentucky has tried and other programs have done that, but you've got to build around guys. So I think part of it is getting guys that, might not be too, if there's a guy that is going to be the next, whoever, LeBron James, of course you're going to go for him, but you don't have to put all that effort in that, because he's not a guy that you're going to build your program around for the long haul.
Does personality matter here, John? I know Frank Martin, to me, we all saw from the outside looking in, very harsh coach, but he also had the other side, the relationship with his players and deep loyalty and the whole thing. Lamont Paris comes in with the seemingly on the outside looking in a polar opposite type approach. A player's coach, he said he's going to let guys play on the offensive end, especially. He'll do some impersonations of Charles Barkley and Morgan Freeman or whatever it is, and it is not going to get after guys the way that Frank Martin did. How much, if at all, do you think that matters to a high school prospect at this point here in 2022?
Well, I think everything matters with a high school product. Relationship building, who's going to get the best out of them, who's going to help them get to the next level. I think a lot was made about Coach Martin and, his harsh personality, or however you want to describe it, but he did have a couple of them follow him to UMass. So some guys want that, want a hard-nosed driven coach that's going to get into them hard coaching, or however you want to speak to it. But some guys want, guys that are going to help them their career after they leave college, whether that's, professional basketball or other places. But the relationships and how you click with a guy really does matter. How are you going to help them off the court? How are you going to help them navigate those issues as well?
And I think there's also a niche. A lot of coaches will go to a niche and just keep hitting that well of a niche over and over and over again, and it works. If you look at a guy like Mike Young when he was at Wofford, he kept going up to Minnesota and getting these guys, Cameron Rundles and Noah Dahlman, over and over and over again, these overlooked players that maybe were a little smaller but fit into his system. He knew exactly what he was getting with these guys, and he just kept going to the well, and he kept going to the NCAA tournament. It landed him at Virginia Tech and landed him on top of the ACC this year.
It reminds me of the old Frank McGuire New York pipeline they had back in the day, and then certainly South Carolina would love to have that. John, is recruiting the state of South Carolina overrated for a Gamecock basketball coach? I think Darren Horn probably did it the best, or had the most in-state guys, clearly didn't have the best results on the court.
No, it's not overrated, but I will say this, you have to go get players from other places. I think I'll go back to my days with Coach Fogler. I think one of the struggles that we had, later in Coach Fogler's career, the state dipped a little bit with talent. Or you had a guy like Jermaine O'Neal who decided to go to the NBA. Now, whether he'd come to South Carolina or not, that's certainly open for debate. But it is important because you want to. You think South Carolina would have had a different feel if, for example, Zion Williamson came for a year, Ja Morant came for 2 years. Or you go get an Aaron Neesmith, you get some of those guys. But you can't just solely depend on those guys. You got to find guys from other places like a Devin Carter, which Frank Martin did a great job. I think Devin Carter's a heck of a basketball player. Coach Fogler did it with a guy like Ryan Stack that played here for a few years. I don't think he was on anybody's big time list, but a 6'11" guy out of Tennessee. He's actually one of the guys that played in the NBA for the Cleveland Cavaliers for a couple of years. So, but it's anything. If he goes out and gets players, other states, and comes in here and wins, people aren't going to care as much about recruiting the state. But I do believe the state, high school basketball in South Carolina is really good. And I think you can get players that can help you win at a next level here. So, yes, I think it's extremely important.
And you got to get guys that, have an association, have a love for the school. There are guys out there who are diehard Gamecock fans or Clemson fans their whole lives. It is a dream to play there, for some guys. And you have to bank on that a little bit. I don't know how much, but you have to bank on that some, that there is a fan factor in a lot of these guys that they grew up watching Carolina or Clemson and want to play for them. We cover a ton of College of Charleston here. College of Charleston is kind of our baby. That's our big thing that we cover. Pat Kelsey has gone and done this Australian thing, and he just continues to bring in guys. He got one coach from Australia who knows everybody in Australia. It's like an untapped resource, and he keeps just bringing guys in over and over and over again from Australia. He did it at Winthrop, and he's doing it now. I just think so much of it doesn't have to be a niche. Maybe your state is your niche, but maybe you just have another niche and it works and you're associated with that and it works for you. You just have to find something that truly works for you. I just don't know what the identity of Lamont Paris is going to be yet.
Yeah, I think that's going to be fascinating, and we'll talk more about the identity of South Carolina as a whole. Scotty, I know you got who you got at 11 a.m. today. You got anybody interesting you got talking to on Zoom for TV?
Yeah, a little interesting story. There's a guy who's worked his way up to the Wrigley Park grounds crew out in Chicago who is from Charleston. So I'm going to chat with him.
Classic. I couldn't have made that up, Scotty. Classic Scott Eisberg story. S. Eisberg, WCIV on Twitter, where you can follow Scotty there. Appreciate your time this morning. As always, great catching up with you, man. And let's do it again, huh?
Sounds great. Good to see you guys. Good to see you, John.
Yeah, good to see you, Scott.
All right, take care.
Man, Scott's is one of the best, always will be. Let's see if you can. All right, I'll press the remove button for you there, Scotty. He's big time over there as a sports director. Always running around. One of the hardest working guys I've ever been around, no matter what industry. John, I know you are one of those as well. I saw it firsthand back in the college days when you were running the crew there for Eddie Fogler. And I think I went to like one practice, maybe two, because I was still really interested in basketball. I was figuring it out. I had just come off of a failed college baseball 1-year experiment going into my sophomore year. And I ended up knowing one of the managers who lived right across from me on your staff. And I was like, hey, he's like, come to practice, see if you want to do it and the whole thing. And I think I went to one and I was rebounding a little bit and getting told to grab some towels and the whole thing. And I was like, yeah, this is not how I'm going to spend my next 3 years in college, man. But I didn't think of it at the time of the education that you get from a coaching perspective. Can you put a price on that, or can you give some insight into what you got to see kind of behind the scenes at your time at South Carolina and how that really set you up to get into coaching right after?
Well, it meant so much to me. The education was on everything, every level. I mean, and the cool thing is my last 3 years, I mean, I had a half scholarship for being a student manager, which was phenomenal. To get to spend time with Coach Eddie Fogler and really everybody on that staff over those 7 years was invaluable. Watching film with Coach Fogler was an incredible experience, watching what he was looking for and then what he told our players and how they do things and how you do things professionally. And then there's the things you don't see that he does to help people, that the media never saw or people didn't hear about because he wasn't big about talking about it. Yes, there was times when we wiped up sweat on the floors, we got water for people, rebounded, but then there was also times where it was pretty cool where we got an all expense paid trip to Maui for 3 or 4 days. And my biggest job on that time was me and Jeff DiBattisto at the time. We collected uniforms after the game, then we turned it into housekeeping at the Maui Marriott, and then picked it up the next day. And that was really the biggest part of our job. And that was a pretty good gig for a few days. And just the connections with people that you got to meet, and even just down to, I mean, I can still remember we got to meet Daniel Rickerman, our new mayor, who was working at Birds on the Wire. It's one of the places we had pregame meal. So we had just tremendous amounts of, dealings with people and how to deal with people. You got to see the insides. I mean, even down to when we hosted Kevin Garnett on an official visit. That was a wild experience, and just different times on how that went. And, just dealing with people and, watching how you run an organized practice, a detailed practice plan. I've got hundreds of practice plans from my time at South Carolina, and how you organize, how you do breakdown drills. I've got hours of VHS tapes of our practices and different things that I'll sometimes go back and watch. How did Jeff Lebo handle this particular practice breakdown drill? We talked about, there was one time we went to Finland and Sweden on an exhibition tour right before we won an SEC championship, and before the 96-97 basketball season. Just it was relationship building with the guys, relationship building with the coaches, and it was invaluable. I'm so glad and thankful for my time there. It was incredible.
You mentioned Jeff Lebo. You mentioned the staff. What other name? We talking Rick Callahan back then as well. Who else you got names wise on the staff that was in your time?
Well, yeah, Rick Callahan was kind of Coach Fogler's top assistant at the time, and who was tremendously great to me. I mean, I did hear horror stories how other staffs and other coaches didn't treat their managers well, but they treat us really, really good. And Barkley Radeball was there, who's now the head coach at Charleston Southern. John Cooper. John Cooper was a guy that I heard that was in consideration for coming back to South Carolina. But now I think he took Tim Buckley's spot, who's now here at South Carolina from UNLV. John Cooper is now at UNLV. And, I still remember I helped on an official visit host Orlando Howell and Mike Boynton at the time. Of course, Mike Boynton now is the head basketball coach at Oklahoma State, and just a phenomenal guy and great coach and great leader of men. Rick Callahan, those were just all really good people. I mean, they took care of us. One of the things too, you're talking about an experience standpoint, Coach Fogler and Rick Callahan helped me get in to work the Michael Jordan basketball camp for 3 years. Wow. And so to spend 3 summers, 3 weeks for a summer working the Michael Jordan basketball camp, getting a chance to talk to Michael Jordan, watch and listen to him. I mean, to me, that was invaluable. That was incredible.
Whoa. It just popped out of me as soon as you mentioned that. Just the opportunity. I got Jordan on the pedestal, and the whole room growing up was a Michael Jordan shrine in my room growing up in the state of North Carolina, and everything he was with the Chicago Bulls. It was right when I was hitting the love of basketball as well, man. That says a lot. What do we get wrong from the outside? What do we not understand about maybe South Carolina basketball in general? Maybe Eddie Fogler specifically, or just college basketball, I guess, at this point too, having had that experience as from the inside, and then kind of turning it around and being a high school coach and having your experience with it now.
Well, I think we're in a microwave society where we want everything right now. We want it quick. We want our information. We want to understand everything. Well, we don't understand it all. We don't understand why maybe, a player doesn't play a certain amount of minutes or doesn't do certain things. Maybe he didn't do what he was supposed to do in the classroom. Maybe, there was times when somebody didn't do what they were supposed to away from the court, might bench him for a little bit. But the coaching staff, like a Coach Vogler, wasn't going to throw a player under the bus and say, well, he missed class today, so that's why he didn't play in the first half. He was going to keep that type of stuff in-house. I do believe college athletics right now, it is the people talk about it being the wild, wild west. There is some wild, wild west going on right now with the money being thrown around for this name, image, and likeness deals. I don't know how much of that is really going on. I know it is going on, and I don't understand that completely. People being able to transfer portal. I mean, that's drastically changed everything. Every player can transfer now one time without penalty. I think that is going to be really big. But also on the flip side, I believe Scott mentioned this is, coaches can now go out and go get players faster than maybe what they've been able to do before. But I think the toughest thing is when we don't understand everything. I don't think, when I talk to people, when South Carolina had that awful basketball season 2 years ago, I don't think people really understood and how difficult they dealt with COVID issues, how difficult Frank Martin dealt with COVID the second time. I think a lot of times we hear about when people get COVID, sometimes it was just a mild cold and that's all that it dealt with them. Well, I think someone like Coach Martin, it really hurt him 2 years ago, the second time when he got it. I think it really knocked him for a loop. And he's a big relationship-driven type of guy. And when he wasn't able to be around his team for a good long time, I think that really hurt. I know me as a high school basketball coach, when we spent that whole summer of 2020 when we weren't allowed to be around our players, that really hurt. Because to me, summer is about team bonding, getting to know your guys, while also trying to help them with their skills. You're trying to learn, well, how can I push their buttons to get the best out of them? When you're not around guys like that, it certainly hurts. But I think it's not knowing everything. We want to know it all. We want to figure out why certain things are done. Maybe we didn't recruit a particular player because you knew they didn't have any interest in it, or maybe they had, they grade-wise, maybe you just knew they weren't going to be able to qualify, or university wouldn't be able to take them. But I will say this, Coach Vogler, what you saw in the media and what you saw was who he was. I mean, he was who he said he was all the time.
Authenticity, right? We hear that a lot with Shane Beamer and the new approach around the Gamecock football program. We'll get into that a little bit more, but first I wanted to ask you, as you were getting towards the end of your last comments, it dawned on me, all right, so what's going to be fair now, a fair expectation when you're talking about wins and losses for Gamecock basketball? Let's just start. I mean, year number one with a new coach in Lamont Paris after the Frank Martin era, because say what you will about Frank Martin, to me, he's right in front of Eddie Fogler from a success standpoint. His tenure of South Carolina, I give that Final Four run a ton of credit. I know the SEC championship deserves a bunch of credit for Eddie Fogler's time as well, but unfortunately, what sticks in my mind, the way I evaluate that just in my own little media critique way, is number 2 seed and number 3 seed, and didn't get a win in the NCAA tournament. Massively disappointing back then for Eddie Fogler's teams. And then you saw Frank Martin take a 7 seed, I think it was back in the day, all the way to the Final Four. That run, absolutely magical. So that's why I give them the nod. I think they're both, really, really close when you evaluate it, and it's just a matter of opinion. But both behind Frank McGuire, pretty significantly overall. But having said that, John, it's a pretty large shadow, and it's an interesting spot to take over right now for whoever was going to come in. But now to do it without that catchy name that I think Gamecock fans became accustomed to from Mike McGee's tenure, right? When you go out and get Lou Holtz and you get Eddie Fogler, who was a national coach of the year from Vanderbilt at the time. When Ray Tanner takes that program to where he took it in baseball, Steve Spurrier takes over for Lou Holtz, the whole thing, man. They became accustomed to that, and rightly so. But then to get a guy who's under the radar guy, I think is a fair way to put Chattanooga's program recently in Lamont Paris and maybe his personality as well. What's a fair expectation? My long-winded question for you here going into year number one.
Well, first thing we got to see who's going to be on his team. They're not completely done with that. I don't know how you can set an expectation when you don't know completely who's all staying, who may go. And it's not even just for your own team. How's the league look? The league could still look different by come October, November of next year. And then you look at your schedule, who are you playing non-conference wise? Who are you playing? I don't like placing a number of wins on it because it really depends on how many wins. It really depends on how many wins in the league, how many, what are your quality wins? Do you have quality wins? Do you have bad losses? I don't think people should be overly concerned about the number of wins in year one, but what is the trajectory of things? How is recruiting going? Does it seem like you're making inroads with certain people? Do you feel like you've got young guys that maybe they don't have a great year, but down the road they're going to be pretty good? Like my first year at South Carolina as a student manager, we had Melvin Watson was a freshman. Ryan Stack was a freshman. We weren't particularly great that first year. Kerry Rich was a senior that year. It wasn't a great year, but we had a losing record that first year, but you could see building blocks coming. There was recruiting, making inroads. BJ Mackey committed that first year. You can see things were on the uptick, even though that the wins and losses wasn't there at the time. You just got to take it all in stride. I go back to the NIL money. What does that look like? Are we making inroads with that? We're going to talk about now how our assistant coaches are a big deal. Well, what if the university hires someone special that specializes in help getting their student athletes NIL money, different things like that? That guy could be extremely valuable. I mean, we talk about, I think in baseball now, your accountants who, come up with these contracts that are, really important to fit under a cap. Well, those type of people are going to become now more and more important within college athletics. Because I think one of the things the NIL money is going to be good for, there's certain players that I think would have left and played in the NBA at other schools, but are going to stay in college now because they're able to make a little bit of money. They don't want to test. They don't want to go to Europe quite now. They can, Sheetway at Kentucky, he sticks around. He's one of the guys that comes to my mind. If that money's not in play, he's probably declaring to go to the league or playing overseas somewhere. But, as far as expectations, we still got to wait and see. I think you still got to wait and see. I think it changes. If he gets 2 or 3 other big time players to come in, to me, the expectations change. If he decides to build on a younger route and go with the younger guys, well, how do they look? Do they struggle in games, but they're close and losing record, or do they get blown out and everything? There's a lot of things still to be determined with that.
I've always been a proponent of this name, image, and likeness thing, of players getting a larger piece of the pie, mm-hmm. with the money having grown so big, and not just recently, obviously in the last several decades, and the $1 billion attached to the NCAA basketball tournament, and then everything that's involved with college football, especially. From your seat as a high school basketball coach, how do you see name, image, and likeness with the NCAA right now?
People said they need to regulate it. They need to put some type of stipulations and regulations on it. Well, what is that? I mean, what are you going to do? I don't think you're not taking it away. But what are you going to restrict? I think the market over time will bear itself out. It will work it out. There'll be some guys, it's like any profession. There'll be some guys that are drastically overpaid. And then if they don't perform, they won't get as much money. Then there'll be some guys that, maybe a football team needs a left tackle really bad. They see one at a smaller school. Well, we'll throw a little money to get him to come in. Sadly, it is going to become a little bit more like professional sports, especially when guys can come and go a little bit more freely, transfer one time. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time to figure out how do you use that to your benefit. And then students are going to figure out too, the student athletes are going to figure out too, is this a wise use of my transfer? Is it better for me to go make a little bit more money on name, image, and likeness, or have a better experience and relationship with my head coach? So I know it sounds great to say put some restrictions or put some guardrails on that, but what does that look like? And I don't know. I was not a big time athlete. So I don't know what that might look like. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they should put some guardrails in place?
I think what you got to avoid is guys picking schools solely because of the deals, right? The rule is written where you can't be guaranteed a certain amount of money in the recruiting process, right? But in the real world, I don't know if you can write anything that's going to keep that from happening. Because I was talking to G.A. Mangus yesterday. He's like, yeah, this has always happened. Now it's above board. I mean, in the real world, it's always happened, and now at least it's above board. At least there's going to be some transparency. I'm looking up some a couple of quotes from the Pac-12 commissioner saying the goal. He's going to Capitol Hill today to talk with some senators. The goal is to discuss a few of the issues facing college athletics with the senators, more likely to eventually get federal legislation on the NIL. Also interested in discussing all the harm that will come to students if they're deemed employees. So I think that might be more of the legalities of that student athlete designation and employees and the whole thing. And I always thought, from my perspective, that college athletes across the board put in as much time as near any employee I've ever seen. So from that perspective, theoretically, I don't have a problem with them being deemed employees. I don't want them to be hurt by that with a tax implication or whatever else it is. So I think I hear what you're saying, John, that you want it to be better than it is right now, right? We don't want it to be overtaking the game or taking away from the experience for fans, players, or coaches. The question is how, and nobody knows the answer, I don't think, right now, John. I think maybe the better question to ask is it possible? And I tend to go where you're saying, is that instead of trying to falsely construct something that we have no idea will work or not, right? It's never happened before, that you can allow it to work itself out in a lot of ways from a market standpoint. I just was, and I think a lot of people were, disappointed that the NCAA didn't put a rule in place to begin with. It seemed like they tried maybe, and then they threw their hands up and said, we'll see. Because I think they thought that they could fight that thing and keep it from happening, and they lost. And the fact that they weren't prepared with a backup plan to have something in place to keep it from becoming, just guns a-blazing all over the place right now, what it is, that's a disappointing part, I think, for everybody involved in college athletics from the outside looking in.
I mean, I really believe that you'd like to believe there's some really smart people over there, even though they do some dumb things at times. You got to believe they came up, bounced around different ideas. Well, what if we put this in play and this in play, put this restriction in there? And at the end, they realized legally they probably couldn't do it. So that's why they just opened it up for everybody. People always use the example, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. And I don't know how you do that. What are you going to now always restrict that only players can make certain amount of money, certain times, or this? I just don't. I just think the market is going to play itself out over time, and then there will be more. I'm sure we'll have some tax issues that come up because people didn't report certain amount of money, and then there's going to be lawyers are going to get involved in and figure out what's like you said, as an employee, there will be probably some types of lawsuits years down the road of some other different things like that.
Well, I think maybe, and you can probably speak to this better than I can, that I'm thinking a lot of programs will come to value, a lot of the non-superpower programs, let's say with the super boosters who can just buy the best talent out there. They're going to come to value good dudes, for lack of a better term. Right, solid guys out there. You mentioned Ja Morant sticking with his Murray State commitment. Scotty was talking about Chris Middleton and how Texas A&M was the first one there, and he ended up going with them. And we see how they've turned out. Right, you see that those guys that valued that turn out to be those guys who have those values and have success. So I'm kind of hopeful that maybe college athletics will come to value instead of give that lip service that coaches always give, right? That we want the right kind of fit and the whole thing in them. I'm sure theoretically they do, but we see them all the time choosing talent over character in a lot of ways because they got to win games and the pressure's there and that's real world stuff. Well, maybe now when it comes down to it, maybe this name, image, and likeness stuff, because of all the real world implications and agents and everybody pulling one way or the other and locker room issues, maybe now I'm kind of hoping that might tilt the other way. And you take, hey, I'm taking the character guy, the guy I know is not going to cause me those issues, or I can tell in this recruiting process really is going to be that high character guy. Maybe that's just a Pollyanna kind of thing. I don't know. But John, you're around these high school athletes all the time. So I think you would know better than me.
Well, there's no doubt that's going to go on, and it's going to go on both ways. Coaches to players, players to coaches. For certain, it's not going to be all just about the money. And then coaches are going to evaluate kids. That we already get asked those type of questions. Do the guys really love to play the game? Do they love being around their teammates, or do they love to just to post about it on social media? Those type of things are going to be really big, moving forward. I mean, the market will play itself out. We're going to hear about things that happen where guys go somewhere just for the money and they realize they made a mistake and they should have stayed at the other school because they got along with the coaching staff better. They had better academics. But I think me and you are pretty lined in agreement. I think it's going to work itself out over time. I think the good dude factor, the good person factor will mean more to certain other people. But I will say at the end of the day, if someone offers you a ton more cash for a short period of time, it's something to at least consider. Money isn't everything, but when it comes to, going to school, it's certain to consider for sure.
Will Wade got fired not too long ago. We just saw the University of Kansas and Bill Self win the national championship with a bunch of allegations hanging over their head. Where is college basketball from that perspective right now, John, and from how you see it with coaches that you've dealt with and stories that you've heard maybe behind the scenes with players and programs? Where is college basketball's, I guess, dirt level right now, without another better way of putting it?
It's in a crazy position right now. I mean, we talk about name, image, and likeness for college athletes. It's coming for high school athletes already. There was Mikey Williams, who is big time high school basketball player that left North Carolina. Now I suppose he's coming back to North Carolina. So those type of issues are now even starting to infiltrate the ground level. It's things that we're even talking about as high school coaches. Where does this evolve? I promise you, there are guys right now, high school athletes, and it's already happened. They're thinking about their career, maybe even after college. They think, well, if I go to this particular high school has a better reputation, which now makes me more marketable because I played at, maybe even a school like Oak Hill, IMG Academy. I can go where Kevin Durant went. I can go where so-and-so. I can have the same type of agent. But, I think the guys that figure out how to use name, image, and likeness the best, the programs that figure out the best, will have an advantage. And it's not going to be just about money, although money will be a big part of it, because then you do have to keep everybody happy. You might be able to get guys in there, but if you can't keep other guys happy or upset that one guy's making a little bit more money than you, or one person's got a Nike deal, well, this other person, I don't have that Nike deal. You've got to figure out a way to bring them all together. It is kind of amazing when you see certain guys like, Kansas does have a lot of accusations against them, but to my knowledge, nothing's been done against them. Now, Will Wade just recently lost his job because of it. I think you'll start seeing more of that stuff come out, although more and more of that stuff now can be legalized. I know you still can't promise a recruit X amount of money, but we all know you can go get a name, image, and likeness deal, set it up to get them money. So the wild, wild west is forming and going strong right now.
Being a guy who's around these high school athletes and in a high school setting right now, I think from a fan perspective, when we're watching college athletes, and I'm getting to that age, right? I'm mid 40s, just at 44. I think we're close to the same age, and getting to I think just the natural progression of saying, oh man, it used to be different back in my day. Are you of the mindset that these kids are much different these days, these athletes, just the environment, society in general is that much different, or more of the, I think, Frank Martin mindset? I know one time he said specifically that no, the kids haven't changed, it's the parents that have changed, and maybe the expectations or what they're kind of taught. Where are you at on that?
I'm probably a little bit, I know I'm supposed to take a side, a little bit on both. I do believe kids are the same. The issue is society's different though. Because when I'm 46, I actually had to think about that, do a little quick math in my head. We didn't have social media when we were in high school. We had to get the Hoop Scoop magazine. We had to get printed paper. You had to be fortunate to get a guy like a Neil White to cover your basketball game in the 90s and read the box scores. You saw just regular pictures of Kevin Garnett, what he was doing at Malden High School. You didn't see the video. So, and guys can communicate with everybody so freely now. Guys couldn't communicate with each other as easy. You had to get a person's home number to talk to somebody back then. So while I do think kids are somewhat the same, society is different, and how they communicate with people is different. Some people will say social media is bad. I like social media, but I do think social media can be bad, but I can also believe it can be used for good purposes, for getting your highlights out there. You can, maybe you couldn't get a coach to come see you, but you tag a coach in a Twitter video, and then automatically they have the opportunity to see your highlight video and may see it. Pretty easy for something you did. It's easier for people to make connections with you. So I believe kids are very similar, and I believe Coach Martin's right. I think too that parents have changed a good bit. They're wanting some of them. You can't label them all. Some of them are more involved and want more for their child, and can be more vocal about it too. I mean, before, parents could just be vocal at the games and that's it. Well, now they can be vocal on social media, and some parents have a large social media following, or they can be vocal at the games, but now they'll be seen because somebody is running around with a camera at every AAU event, every high school event, doing it. And of course, us at the high school level, we need to put ourselves out there as well. We need to spend time on social media, trying to put some of our players out there, because we're doing our best to try to get our players to be seen by college coaches, to be seen in other avenues. So I do think kids are remotely the same. Society has drastically changed.
And now, how do we make it better, I guess, is my immediate question. I agree with you about the social media thing, right? It's easy to say, oh, it's terrible and the whole thing. But hey, man, I got to see this little kid that was sitting in the stands in Toronto hug the guy, the Blue Jays fan that caught the home run ball, and you got to go meet Aaron Judge and the whole thing. I don't think I would have known that story otherwise outside of social media. And I mean, I knew it near instantly, right after this thing happened. Just like that. It's an example of how social media can be used for good. We see it all the time. I think the fact that players from colleges can put out their side of things and can retweet these ridiculous things that get tweeted at them from awful fans, right, who are just ridiculously emotional and put something out there and think this guy is just a number on the field and not a real human being or whatever, and don't even think twice about the consequences of the action. I think that's great. You expose a lot of things, get it out in the light, the things that were used to be left on Todd Ellis's voicemail back in the day by his own Gamecock fans, right? I think it's better for us that we can get that out there. But when you were talking about AAU events and cameras and the whole thing, one thing that we've seen sports in general, but basketball kind of led the way, is the de-emphasis of playing for your community or your local area. And I think those of us who did grow up in that time where it wasn't as much AAU emphasis, even though there was some, obviously, still 25 years ago. But with travel ball teams being what they are in other sports and the whole thing, how can high school sports get back to really being important to the community or being what it was, or is that era gone, John, or is that impossible now?
I'm one of those that don't believe anything's impossible when it comes to things like that. One thing I will give the NCAA credit that has tried to value the high school experience more is just a couple of years ago, they had made it to where college basketball coaches can now come out in the month of June. Division I coaches can come out to scholastic events. And you had to be a particular high school. You had to be from a certain state, part of the NFHS group. And, we had two different events. We had this one back in June in Rock Hill, and we had college coaches from all over. We had Duke. We had Mike White, who was at Florida at the time. Frank Martin was there all 3 days. Brad Brownell was all 3 days. We had all big time college basketball coaches to see them play with their high school basketball team, because college coaches want to see that a lot too, because and Frank Martin has talked about this in the past too. High school guys, you're around each other every day. You're around each other. You're roaming the halls with them. You're eating lunch with them. Well, how do you interact with your high school teammates will be a little bit different than how you interact with your AAU teammates. That can be a very different thing. I believe high school athletics can transform communities. They can bring a community together when a team goes on a state championship run. You just see the pride in a school, on a Friday night at a football game, a big time basketball game. While I don't know if it will ever completely go back to the way it was, I still see, high school athletes that we're part of, they love playing for their school. They love being a part of something big. And you'll see high school or AAU events may get more publicity from college coaches, may get some more Twitter likes and different things like that. But you won't see too many high AAU basketball games where there might be 3,000 or 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people in the stands, a student section. You're not going to see a student section in an AAU game. I haven't seen one. But those type of things, those kids love it. Because that's one thing COVID taught to me too. When we, our first year, 2 years ago, playing in front of COVID restrictions, we could only have a couple of hundred people in the stands. And our players really, really missed having a packed house. When we could play a Ridgeview, the place would be absolutely packed. Well, we couldn't do that. And, we'd still have 300 or 400 people in there. It's still a good environment, but it wasn't the same. So while I still think people will value high school athletics and, pursuing a championship and coming together, I don't know if it will go back to completely the same thing, but it's still going to be a very important piece of a person's education.
Man, you brought it up. I didn't even think to ask you about it, since you've been coaching through all of this stuff, been coaching and teaching and the whole thing. Can you give us some insight into everything that has gone into that? You mentioned how difficult it was for Frank Martin and the Gamecock basketball program a couple of years ago. But what about from the high school level? Because I remember talking to Chris Deering about this one time and just saying we were just following Friday night high school football and cancellations and, postponements, and then getting a game going on a Wednesday, a couple of days before a Friday, and the whole thing. How I thought it was the most difficult level to deal with that, just because of you don't have the resources that you have in professional sports or college sports and the whole thing. And you got to figure it out pretty much on your own or with a very small staff and not much time and resources to do it. How has that been for you specifically here the last few years?
Well, the first year that we really got into it, I'll just say it was awful. We didn't have a whole lot of fun. Like I said, we didn't spend any time over that summer. I guess it was 2020, where we weren't around our guys at all. I mean, there's certain guys when we had tryouts come in November that I haven't seen since the year before, because we weren't allowed to be around them. So that relationship piece was really big. Then we got started with our season. We had a lot of restrictions. I mean, we had to physically check their temperature, ask the same 3 or 4 questions every single day before every single practice. Then we would do our best. Are you making sure you wear a mask? Then we had issues with guys that some of them weren't coming on campus to learn. They were distance learning. So they would have issues getting to practice on time. There was just a lot of challenges. And then unfortunately, we played our best game of the year. We beat Hammond, my buddy David Ross, there on a Saturday night. The next day, Sunday, I woke up feeling horrible and I had COVID. So, and then the rest of our December was pretty much wiped out. we shut down for like 3 or 4 weeks. And, we only played 14 games that particular year, when a normal year is probably about 24 games or so. So it was extremely difficult, but then we figure out ways to adapt to it. And, this past year, things were a little bit more normal. We were able to do this last year was more normalish. I mean, we were able to do more of a normal summer, get to spend time with our guys, go to some different tournaments. And, I love teaching and I love coaching, but it is a challenge to teach online. It is a challenge to teach in front of a monitor. Now, certain people did a great job at teaching. Certain kids did a great job learning. But I struggled as a teacher. Like, body language is big to me. And sometimes it's hard to tell body language over a TV screen, especially if you got a TV screen with, we only got two boxes here. I had TV screen, 18, 19 boxes. And it was a challenge with that. And, getting everybody back in school, there's certainly been challenges with it. But I think you see the importance of education, the importance of athletics, where we bring guys together and talk about some of these things that they dealt with. We can even go down the path of the mental health issues. Mental health is that's one thing that's been real big with me too these past 2 years, is checking on people. How's your mental health? With the different challenges that you're facing. I know I had guys that were trying to do school, come to practice, but then also take care of a little brother, a little sister while they're at home. Those things weren't easy. So it's been a very educational experience. I'm extremely thankful that we're hopefully pretty normal right now. And that's been great.
How do we keep that in mind as we move forward and have that maybe newfound appreciation for just sports in general? Like, just for you and I talking about sports right now, it was an afterthought to even for me to bring that up. And for that, I should be extra thankful, I think, because it hasn't been a major issue in sports in general or in a lot of people's lives, I think, here in the last few months. Is there any way that we can, I know it's human instinct to kind of just move on and make the adjustment and adapt and forget how difficult it was, or not have that appreciation that we should? Do you have any good advice about how we can, from a sports fan perspective, from if you're playing or coaching, to always value what we're having, and especially after what we went through?
It goes back a lot of things we talked about, developing relationships with people as much as you can. You try to understand with the guy, for me as a coach, when I'm going with my players, I try to understand what is going on in their lives right now. Try to talk to them as best we can. Hey, I get it. A guy might be 5 minutes late to practice, which on any normal level is not okay with me. Is not. But when you find out that there's 5 minutes late because mom just had to take brother and sister to the doctor, and then they had to run somewhere else, drive and come here. Okay, I can understand that. I can be harsh on them because they were 5 minutes late, but I understand why. I think it's try to understand that, hey, first thing is you're not going to understand it all. You're not going to understand why so-and-so didn't play well, why so-and-so, I had a particular player this past year that had the flu, and that really hit him worse than COVID. And it took him a couple of weeks to get back where he needed to be. I think it's just really trying to develop relationships and a certain amount of compassion for people, and try to understand, hey, we may not know everything that they're going through. Some people are going to put every detail of their lives out there on social media. And then some people are very private with what they share. Both are certainly understandable for sure. But for me, I just try to understand, maybe why something is and how we can make things better through sports.
Yeah, good advice just for everyone, not necessarily in sports. And as you're going through that, I always consider myself a kind of private person. It's hilarious. I think I'm in the spot I'm in right now with the COVID situation and the whole deal. But that's life, man. That's where we are. That's where the country is, for sure. I appreciate the values that you've been standing up for. You've got your own podcast going as well, the Ballmetto podcast. What is your aim for that? And everybody can go check out the Twitter handle in there too, and follow that sucker. And I assume it's basketball based, but then it's kind of the people behind the basketball, right?
Well, yeah, the Ballmetto State podcast is about trying to discuss basketball or anything related to it with what I call a South Carolina flavor to it. My last couple of podcasts, I had one with Yerrick Stoneman, who I've gotten to know pretty well over the past few years. And he's got some, he's fantastic to listen to. But even then, I'll go back. I had author Jesse Washington on. Jesse Washington wrote the John Thompson book, I Came as a Shadow, in which I think it's one of those books that, it's not a sports book. It's not a basketball book. There's a lot about life in there and a lot about things that maybe I didn't understand about. When I grew up, I looked at Georgetown as the evil empire because they were tough. But when you listen and read the book, and having Jesse Washington on the podcast to talk about those different things, it was transformative to me. But we have different other people. I've had Melvin Watson on the podcast, which was fantastic, and they just won a state championship 2 years ago. So our goal is just to talk basketball with different people. We had Murray Garvin, who was a South Carolina State basketball coach a couple of years. So I just, and it's a selfish thing too. I love talking basketball with people. I'm trying to pick these guys' brains a little bit. What makes them successful? What are they interested in? And it's been very educational for me.
Yeah, I can understand it from the selfish perspective as well. Been repeating the phrase egocentric utilitarianism. Try to, when you're doing what you want to do most, and ideally it's what's best for everybody involved. Hoping that's what this podcast can be, and really appreciate all the participation and you helping us out here today, man. I wanted to get your thoughts before we let you go. You mentioned you're a Gamecock and the whole thing. You can't be a Gamecock without talking some Gamecock football. And Shane Beamer, we talked about the personality fit that may or may not be Lamont Paris with the Gamecock basketball job. I don't know of anyone who can deny, even Clemson fans, that Shane Beamer has been just a breath of fresh air for the University of South Carolina as a whole, but especially the football program. Where do you see this thing going? What have you seen in a year into this thing?
Well, I'm excited for Coach Beamer. I love to use that word, how he uses love as part of his program. It doesn't feel like a business with him. I didn't have a problem with Coach Muschamp, but I will admit, when you think about it, to me, it felt like it was a business. It was all about, all right, we're going to get these guys ready for the league, trying to get them into the NFL. And I feel now that doesn't mean Coach Beamer isn't trying to do the same thing to develop his players to get to the league, but he is. I feel he's genuinely authentic when he's trying to build relationships with not only his players, but people in the community. You see what he's been to a Carolina hockey game. I didn't even know that existed until I saw a picture of him at a South Carolina hockey game. I like the authenticity of him. He seems like a real guy. It doesn't seem like, he shares his personality. I've read a couple times where he's made mistakes. So I'm excited for what he's done, and you could tell, and the players seem to really love him too. During the season, it's funny how it was after a couple of games. I don't think people were real happy with Shane Beamer. Then towards the end of the year, now everybody seems to love him. Well, then let's judge it as it goes along, not just after every game or every missed recruit or every practice or injury. I'm excited for where he's moving in the direction of the program, and it seems like he's doing it the quote unquote right way.
To me, he said things in his introductory press conference that I don't even know if Gamecock alums or fans, people associated with the university, knew they needed to hear. But when they heard them, I think you just attached to it immediately. And I completely hear what you're saying about the way the season was going after that Tennessee game, man. I think only logically you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm not seeing it. And then on the polar opposite, obviously a ton of positive momentum in this offseason coming off of that bowl game victory. To me, it's always interesting to see how a coach is ultimately evaluated, right? What is the breaking point for one coach at one program versus the breaking point at another program? And then how do you maintain positive momentum? Certainly Spencer Rattler is a big part of that, I think, for Gamecock football right now. But what comes along with that is raised expectations, and you're seeing fans expect 9 wins and the whole thing. And man, the constant ebb and flow of all of that. I know you've been through it for decades as well, being a South Carolina alum, and being here in the right around the Columbia area, it's fascinating, isn't it? In so many ways.
Oh, it is. It is very fascinating how one win or one recruit coming has completely changed. I mean, I remember there seemed to be when Spencer Rattler committed to coming to South Carolina. I think everybody like, whoa, everybody's expectation level of what South Carolina football program is just elevated. Steve Spurrier helped a lot with that too, help elevating what we could be at this program. And it's a tough job here at South Carolina, but you could see people want it to be really good, and there are resources here. You have fans that show up all the time. So I mean, I'm excited about the future. I maybe pump the brakes a little bit on the expectations because you just never know how a season goes. How does injuries play out? What another team does? I mean, we could still have 6 wins this year and be a better football team based off of who we're playing. I mean, Georgia's not going anywhere. Georgia's going to be pretty doggone good. Everybody in the SEC, it's going to be really difficult. And I'm going to be fascinated to see how Coach Beamer and his staff navigate the whole process. How do they handle the ups and downs? Not only because nowadays it's not about just doing it with your players. You also need to figure out how you do that with fans. And that's part of where you have a good social media team. You have good sports information directors that help in that. Because it certainly means a lot to people. It means a lot to me.
A year in, what kind of marks do you give Shane Beamer? Year and a half in, I guess, is what it is now. I'd
say you have to give him an A. I mean, the momentum's positive. You get good recruits coming in. You give it. I'm going to give him an A. I mean, he did better than honestly that I thought they would do from a wins and loss perspective. Their culture seems to change. People seem to be really happy with the direction of the program, and that's huge these days.
The fit there with Shane Beamer to me has been near ideal. I always got the sense, and I get this from certain people, I thought Dave Odom was a better fit personality-wise with the South Carolina basketball program than Eddie Fogler was, and then Frank Martin was as well, for various reasons. Did you ever get that? And then after hearing Lamont Paris in his introductory press conference, I think he could be a great fit for the South Carolina job with a low-key sense of humor, being a player-type guy, knowing the importance of defense, especially in a league like the SEC with his track record, and also I think not coming in with outsized expectations, I think is a big thing for a coach at the University of South Carolina. I guess the original question then was the fits that you've seen through the basketball program recently. Are you on the same page with me there, or am I missing something?
No, I think that's pretty good. I mean, it's, I'm looking forward to learning more about Coach Paris. I mean, he could be a low-key guy out and about, but extremely competitive, extremely driven because he knows what other people are saying. He certainly read the comments about how this coaching search was botched or whatever people out there have said. Well, he's going to be a competitive guy. Now, he may not put that out there on Twitter, it's us against the world or anything like that. But I'm looking forward to seeing how he builds that, and can he connect with the fans here? Then, most importantly, connect with his players to get the best out of them. Because nowadays, you've got to connect with your players and want to keep them here. They might have a great year, but if he doesn't connect with them, those guys can leave too. Now with the transfer portal, but I think Coach Paris could be a good fit. But it's like anything, you just got to win. I mean, we'll see how that goes over time.
No doubt about it. John Combs, man, really appreciate all the help, support through the last few months as well, the help on the podcast today, and looking forward to having you on again sometime soon.
That sounds great, Tim. Thanks, and have me anytime.
Awesome. John Combs there, head coach of Westwood basketball, Westwood High School in Blythewood, right outside of Columbia. And John certainly knows a ton about Carolina basketball, a ton of firsthand experience, having been inside the program as a student manager back in the heyday of Eddie Fogler in the SEC championship, and just knowing a guy like Kerry Rich and all those other guys that came through, BJ Mackey and Melvin Watson he was talking about, Larry Davis, both of those last two guys with successful high school basketball program these days, along with John, who's bounced around the Columbia area to one successful basketball program after another, or helped those programs gain a bunch of success, and now over at Westwood High School in the Blythewood area. And what he was talking about there from Shane Beamer, I think, is really, really fascinating about how coaches are evaluated. And then it's not just a coach's own fan base, like Gamecock football, but then from what about the regional, the conference, the SEC perspective, or the national perspective? Because we all know Shane Beamer comes into South Carolina as Frank Beamer's son to a lot of people, even though he coached 20 plus years as an assistant at big time programs and under some other big time coaches like Steve Spurrier at South Carolina. A lot of casual college football fans will say, "Oh yeah, that's Frank's son." Okay, that makes some sense, and I think he's done a tremendous job of balancing the respect for that, the knowledge of that, and then having a bit of the chip on the shoulder as well of, I got to make my own identity, but doing it respectfully. I think that can be the most difficult part for competitors a lot of times, to compete at the absolute highest level, want to win at nearly all costs possible, and yet doing it in a respectful way. And I asked John to evaluate Shane Beamer through whatever 18 months, and he gives him the A. I do as well, but I do it because I think we've seen a couple of different examples of who he is, right? You get asked after the Georgia game, what do you think of Jordan Davis up front, or whatever the question was specifically? How did you not move the ball more on offense? He's like, well, they got 5 stars all over the place. That was him reacting emotionally in the moment and really giving us a glimpse, I think, of who he truly is. And people loved it by and large across all over college football. I mean, it was just an honest answer from a frustrated coach that just lost, was just right out of the heat of battle. And I think that was one of the large missing pieces from the Will Muschamp era, is that we never thought we got anywhere close to the honesty or the true picture of who Will Muschamp was to his team, or maybe even as a person, because you saw the fiery Will Muschamp at times, a lot of times, especially earlier in his career on the sidelines. And that's who he is, man. That's how he got to be a captain at Georgia as a walk-on, and then has had so much success as a coordinator and the whole thing. And then he got burned at Florida. Not only from a lack of winning and losing perspective, but I think a lot of people have said it, losing some trust in his public comments, or being phrased a certain way, being painted in a certain perspective, and really felt guarded as the University of South Carolina head coach in a lot of ways. And I think there was always that missing piece. First of all, you come in as the failed coach at Florida, and it's a difficult spot to come into at the University of South Carolina, but then to have had some success, especially that second year, win an Outback Bowl, and have Jake Bentley coming back, and it looks like you got the program rolling, and then to have it step back, and how you react to those things, I think, can be as equally important sometimes as the results on the field. But ultimately, John's right. I mean, it comes down to, you got to win in college athletics. You got to win. That can bring us back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Gamecock baseball. Last night, 9-4 win against a team they're supposed to beat in North Carolina A&T, and now going this weekend to a massively important SEC series at Texas A&M. You win the series, you advance, right? I feel like they're in a survive and advance position in a lot of ways from an NCAA tournament standpoint, and you got to win and advance these last 3 series. Otherwise, those NCAA tournament hopes might be done. And speaking of done, I think that's going to about do it for our program here today. Really appreciate all the participation in a lot of different ways. On Twitter, we had the poll question up and rolling. What's the most underrated day? Let's see if we can get some results for you on today's poll question. Looks like our winner is going to be Thursday, Thursday at 39% of the vote, narrowly beating opening day and Cinco de Mayo in third place, April Fool's Day. A lot of great write-ins. Michael hitting us up with a Friday after Thanksgiving. Most people are off. The leftovers are still good. That's an excellent write-in vote, man. Really appreciate all of your participation, like I said before, and happy to have you on day number 4 of Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent. I got to run to the bathroom in all honesty. That's why you're not getting the last 10 minutes or so up until noon. We'll see you tomorrow on a Friday. Who knows where it's going to go, that edition. Thanks for listening to this edition, day number 4 of Tim Hill Unrestricted Free Agent.